Hi, Jeff. Good evening. Good evening,
Buenos
Jeff.
días. Oh, buenos tardes. No, buenos noches.
Or as I like to say, hey, what's up? What's going on?
Well, I was doing some research about Mad Mike Hughes after you said, maybe it's just, there's something fishy going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And I found his GoFundMe, $10,000. And this time he wants to go 62 miles up to what's officially the boundary between our atmosphere and outer space.
Oh, well, when I read the link, I went to his GoFundMe page when you sent it, and I did start rethinking what I said because I thought for a second, well, at the end of the day, this is a guy jumping in a homemade rocket and launching himself into the sky. So, you know, uh, there has to be some validity, to his exploration.
As
I
in,
do
as
think,
in, as in, versus a conspiracy, not to the validity, to the idea that he's found some truth here, but to the idea that he's really pursuing truth.
well, no, let's just say, I think, at the end of the day, we're talking about, a brave soul. I mean, somebody that's willing to, kind of jump in again, a homemade rocket like that and take off into who knows what. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's probably on the side of things where he believes there is a dome that we're encapsulated. I could be wrong, but um,
I do know
he
this, that Dana probably should put her phone from speakerphone
why she's
to.
typing?
That's a type of typing. I think she's tapping. I think she's actually burping a baby.
It's Morse code.
Oh,
Is that like John McCain? I heard he would use messages to speak to fellow prisoners.
No, I'm just burping a baby.
There's some other prisoner who has to sit through this program who you're talking to.
Um, so would you say that this guy, Jeff, is a kindred spirit as far as having the visionary spirit in him?
Well, I would say it's an interesting example of something you brought up the other day, and that is that in the Guinness Book of World Records children's book we have, every page is a man who's doing something really stupid.
Yes. It wasn't Guinness book. It was like an extreme cars book or something.
I think it was Guinness World Book Records for cars. And it was page after page of idiotic males who waste tons of time and money on completely ridiculous things.
Yeah, it was the motorized baby stroller that like had rockets or something. And
oh, that would, yeah, no.
I forget the other ones now, but like
World's
cars
largest
with humongous
shopping cart.
wheels.
World's largest shopping cart.
Yeah.
But Dana was wondering where the women are represented. Why is it only men represented in the Guinness World Book of Records wheel children's book? It was about big wheels. What do you think about that, Ron? There's also a lack of diversity we noticed. It was mostly males,
Yeah.
and that's about it.
Males represented in the children's book. Is that what you're referring to?
No, it was all men. It was a whole book of world records, Guinness Book of World Records, and it was a bunch of men. So like Mike Hughes here, Mad Mike Hughes, which is in our theme song for the start of the thing. That's his rocket blasting off. He's building a rocket so he can go out into the edge of space there to somehow take a better look at the Earth and I suppose decide if it's flat based on what he's seeing. So, what is with the lack of women who are doing really dumb things?
Well, would you say that women tend to be a little more conservative in that area of exploration and doing stupid things? That they're more mindful a lot of times of the consequences. They're. I don't know about you, but in my experience, women tend to have um,
The word
a
you're looking for
little.
is intelligent, a little bit more intelligent.
Yeah, and intelligent, intuitive.
Um,
They're typically, not all the time, but a lot of times, long-term thinkers. So they're in touch with those kind of things. So, yes, I'm not.
so
Although I'm
do
not
you think there's a
surprised.
glass ceiling? Maybe there's a
A
glass,
stupid glass ceiling.
yeah,
A
a
glass
stupid
ceiling
glass
on
ceiling.
stupid.
Like all these, it's like a bunch of stupid men. Like where are the women represented? It's really, Dana was kind of puzzled by this actually.
No, it's a great question. Um,
And why isn't the NPR doing a story on the lack of women?
Wasting large amounts of time building random useless things in their garage while they
yeah,
neglect all other responsibilities.
yeah. Well, I'm just, I think about this. There is the I don't know if Mad Mike is married, but there is that saying behind, every great man is a greater woman, that kind of thing. So there is the possibility, just think about this for a minute. There is a possibility that there's somebody on the other side of that transaction supporting this individual doing crazy stuff.
Or frustrated.
Yeah, no, just frustrated and annoyed, and gosh, he broke his leg with his homemade,
Yeah, yeah, all that. I mean, but you got to think there is, maybe the possibility of somebody on the other side supporting it, at least in some respect. So
Speaking of
maybe,
differences, we stumbled upon another gender extreme difference. I heard about it in the news. I sent you a link,
and I read it.
and that was someone did some research on desirability level, I guess, of different online dating um, profiles, and they averaged out the desirability, I guess, something like that. I don't want to be quoted on what I'm saying, but I believe that's what they did, and they found that the men and women appear to peak in their desirability at different ages.
Yeah, no, I'm guessing, I'm guessing Dana, your partner, of course,
Yes, my partner.
um, being that you turned a ripe age just a couple weeks
Oh,
ago,
yes.
and I'm sure that's uh, 8 kids later, almost irresistible. I mean, come on.
Well, the
Wait,
article said,
who Jeff? Jeff is irresistible now.
Yeah, I mean,
hold on. The article said that women peak in their desirability based on the data at age 18, and men peak in their desirability at age 50, I guess.
holy cow. So,
I even more disturbingly, I think I heard one commentator speculate that it's actually even younger than that, but they started at 18 to do this data because it would be a little weird to go younger. But
well,
I guess someone else said that it's more like 16
they did use
as
the
far as peak
words.
desirability for
Yeah, they
women.
did use the words peak desirability there. They didn't. I mean, they didn't come out and say it, but my goodness, if you couldn't be any more direct without actually saying that, because what they're actually saying is the fact that it sounds like to me that they're saying women in general are more desirable at younger ages. Is that what I'm reading from the article you sent?
Yes, that appears to be what they're saying.
So what about
Now
the
that's
whole
so, that's
what about the
that's
whole
that's
cougar
self-reported.
thing though? What
That's
about the whole
self-reported though.
yeah,
No,
well, I
but
was
So
gonna
this
say
isn't speaking to rightness or wrongness. It's simply a study. I guess they not, what I mean by self-reported. I don't mean self-reported. I mean they just studied. I didn't read exactly how they did it actually. I did a little bit ago, but I can't remember exactly how they did it. But anyhow, they just somehow they measured the desirability of these profiles. Do you know how they did it?
I thought it was
no.
just based on how interested people were in reaching out to those age groups, and it would drop off as the women got older. You know, there'd be less response online, and then the opposite for the men.
There you
Does that
Well,
go.
make sense?
I'm assuming in these studies there aren't 16-year-olds on these dating apps and a variety of men above the age of 18 trying to contact these people. So, I mean, the study probably needs to be qualified a little bit, right? I mean, what are they looking at? Um, how are they did state that that they based it on the responses that they received, the number of responses, and even went into some of the wording, which was kind of interesting, right? I mean, but would you agree? I mean,
But oh,
um, we're talking about they said peak desirability. Um, what exactly are they talking about there?
I need to read it, but without getting too much into the details, I bring it up to say, like it or not, culture or not, I don't know. It sure seems like men and women might be a little different.
Yes, yes, probably a lot different, right?
In this
In
case, it seems quite a bit different, actually, right? I mean, this is
mhm.
not a small difference. This isn't within the margin of error, as one might say. This is 30 years difference, right? Is what's 18 plus 30? That's 32 years of difference.
Yes,
And then it's just so interesting, and it I don't know. Now Dana noticed something. She saw that some people were responding to this study. Can you share that, Dana? You were telling me about some of the different responses you saw to this study online.
Oh, I think it was just some anger from women, and kind of like a defensive reaction to the numbers. Where I saw some Twitter thread where women would post themselves at 18 and then themselves now at like age 35, and like kind of like saying, I'm so much better now at 35. You know, look at me. I'm so much more attractive. And then they'd get a lot of positive response, like, yeah, you go, girl. You're, and it's like, okay. And we thought it was funny. And maybe there are some male responses of 20-year-old males who feel slighted by this data, and they're angry and wanting to show how attractive they are and how much better they are than a 50-year-old version of themselves. But I imagine the men don't care as much to know
yeah,
that they're viewed as less attract, maybe that they're going to get less interest as a
hmm
22-year-old man versus being old and established at 50.
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
think men care in the same
Um,
way that maybe women do, or some
So
women
you
seem
got to
to?
frame it right, Ron. If you were 20 to 25 years old and you heard about this study, would you be upset?
no, no, not at all.
That's another
um,
difference Dana's pointing out is that there's some women that are very upset by this, and it's almost it's kind of funny because it fits right in line with the fact that there seems to be a want to be desirable.
Well, there is, but what I think what the study probably doesn't take into account a lot of things. And the truth of the matter is, women at, we'll call them advanced ages, are desirable.
Geriatric ages.
Geriatric ages, are desirable and probably just as desirable as men are at those ages. And that has a lot to do with just a number of different things. I don't think it has anything to do with really necessarily the age itself. But you could take, because, and I will just base that information on my own experiences, and my own experiences being the many, 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 many conversations that I've had with males, or comments that I've heard from males about women that are older. And straight across the board, there is no, no, that doesn't work for me. That, when it comes to a male, that just doesn't happen. So I'm not sure about how they collected this information, but I think, at the end of the day, there are some things that need to be considered, at least from my perspective. But I could be incorrect. You know, Again,
Yes.
just an opinion
Well, yes, and there's
and an
also a lot,
observation.
and also you think about why people go on a dating website and what they're looking for, and what maybe stereotypically men might go to a dating website for versus what women might be looking for on a dating website. So I could see possibly more women um, looking to finally find somebody to settle down with and have a stable relationship with, whereas men might just be acting like pigs.
Also,
Whoa, whoa,
I'm
whoa,
looking at the
whoa.
data right. No, we cannot.
Whoa.
We can't. Do you have
That's
something to say, Juan?
that's cruel. That's cruel. That's a little rough, Dana.
Well, wouldn't you say
Also,
that that's probably, possibly might be a factor here? Why do people go on these dating websites?
Well, it may be a topic for another show, but I would like to ask you about this, male stigma that most males walk around with, that they're just pigs. That would be a good topic.
Sure.
now let me add something to the mix. I'm looking at the study right now, and something interesting to consider is men's peak desirability as they measure it here. Peaks at about, looks like about 0.5, maybe 0.55 or 0.54. So when they're 20, they're at 0.45, and they hit zero point 0.5 around 30, and then they're at zero point 0.5, maybe 5 around 50. And then it drops down to about 0 0.5, maybe 4. Like it's really not a lot of change for the men. That's another thing that's interesting. Whereas women at age 20 are at zero point 0.6, and then by 30, something to think about. By 30, they're at zero point 0.5, which is the max for men. So they're still desirable. They're still more desirable than the average guy, if that makes any sense, even into their 30s. I hope I'm communicating here
Yes, you are.
clearly. But then after 30, it drops down pretty, it has this downward trend. It's at zero point 0.4 by 40, zero point 0.3 by the time they're about 50, 0.35. So there's also a wider range in the desirability, where men, they're not really that much more desirable by the time they're 50, if that makes sense. But for women, they're still more desirable than men all the way into their 30s. But after 30s, they have that real steep drop. So there's a much wider range in the desirability too. So anyhow, I don't know if that adds to the conversation at all, but the range for women is much greater than it is for men too, of desirability. So anyway,
Well,
none of it.
well, so would you say then that when it comes to I think what I read it was saying that the younger you were for women, the more responses that you receive. And for men in that range of being like 50 or older, that was the point where, or excuse me, about 50 or younger. But, they didn't really drop off the map until they reached the age of 50.
Well,
But
actually,
women
they
started
increase.
dropping off.
They increase. The
Yeah,
men
I
increase in
know.
desirability up to 50, whereas the women decrease. Once a woman hits 30, they drop. But just to be clear, I mean, it's not till they're about 40 years old that they get completely lower than men altogether.
Well, hold
If
on.
that makes sense.
So are you saying that if a woman is 18 and she signs up for the dating app, she's going to get the probability of getting responses is going to be the highest during that age.
Yep.
And as she gets older, 19, it starts to drop off 20, 21, it starts to drop off from that point. And her, the highest chances that she has at age of 18. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, Dana, I guess I might have a question for you now about this idea of men, right? So think about that for a minute. Men obviously are the ones reaching out to these women. What do you think about that? What do you think about an older man approaching a younger woman like that?
What do you mean? What do I think? Like,
yeah. Do you
it
feel like
seems like it fits reality. That seems normal.
right? So
Right.
that's not something completely unusual, right? I mean, that is something that just kind of happens.
Yeah, and you're more likely to see couples with the man being older. I think it's less common to have an older woman. And but the numbers did make me kind of question how this fits into the overall picture, because for the most part, the married couples I know are similar in age. There's not really a big age gap, but perhaps that's not really what these numbers represent, right? But if you ever are going to see an older person in a couple, it's usually the man. Unless, like you brought up this cougar thing. I really hope that we're never on these dating websites. Like, that would be really nice to never have to venture into that area. Am I right, Jeff?
I think didn't we Jeff, did we
I was thinking of that too.
did we talk about that?
Yeah, I recall when we were discussing multiple wives. Are you talking about that? And how it would be interesting to go on to one of these dating sites and say, I'm looking for a second wife, and just to see see what kind of response you would get. And Ron, you might be reaching your peak age for this kind of thing.
Well, no, that's what I was going to say. I mean, this is
your time.
This might be a very good opportunity to maybe set up that profile. That was funny. So Dana, you've made the same observation that I have, probably Jeff as well, that kind of naturally, and it seems like even in most marriages, the male is at least a couple years older. Yes, agreed.
Well, yes, and well, for us, Jeff is exactly a day and a year older.
Well, that's it. It's proven.
That's it.
So and I've seen in most situations, the male is older. Although my parents, I think my mom is 7 years older than my dad. It's a little bit different.
Yes, that's a big gap.
Yeah, it's a pretty big gap. So, I mean, that doesn't happen very often. I mean, as far as observation, not from what I've seen. Do you think so that
I
makes me
have a,
want to
I have
that
a,
makes me
I,
want to ask another question though. That makes me want
before
to
you
ask
ask
another.
it, John McCain died recently, and his second marriage, he's currently 81 years old, and his new wife, Cindy McCain, is guess how old would she be?
Um, he was 81, right?
81. She's currently 64.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say
You
68,
know,
69,
that's
something
about,
like
is that 15 almost 16, 17 years?
17. Yeah,
But
and remember we saw they both lied about their age, I guess. Like up
oh,
until the wedding
this
date,
is
that's
true.
when they got their license. I guess that's when they realized each other's true age. Because she lied to sound older and he lied to appear younger.
Nothing like a couple liars getting together, you know?
Oh no, I mean, come on. But kind of the natural order of things, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically, it seems like older man, younger woman, just for the majority of relationships. Yes, yes.
It appears I could do a search while you continue talking. But there's also Trump,
Well,
right? Good old Trump.
mm-hmm,
His wife is 48. I'm looking it up
mm-hmm.
right now, and she's 48
Wow.
and he's 72.
Yeah.
So there you have a 22, 24-year
24.
difference.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But hey, this is all lining up with the data.
So Dana, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Because obviously in that category, men are overrepresented, right? I just said a word that doesn't exist.
Hey, exists
Um,
now, wrong.
it does now,
You put it on the map.
but women in that category, right, it's highly unlikely, or at least the likelihood of a woman marrying a man that is younger than her, um, when you think about it in terms of like that. So by far, I think from just observation, by far the majority of relationships, the man is older, the woman is younger. With that said, do you I mean do you feel like there's an issue with that, Dana? Do you feel like that's not something women kind of gravitate towards in general? Or do you think that no, women do actually gravitate towards older men?
Yeah, I would say we as a group
Speaking
seem
for all
pretty
women here.
comfortable with that. I could just think for myself if Jeff tragically died, and that'd be very sad. I would be it would be very unnatural, I think, for me to date someone 10 years younger. That would be
20 year
very
old
weird.
strapping young lad.
20, well, no, well, I'm old, so 29. But to going older seems normal. That doesn't seem as odd.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I find that a little bit interesting just as far as people's behaviors, right? Like the things that they'll naturally gravitate towards. As you said, it seems a little bit unnatural. And that seems to be something that you will, that's not just your opinion, that's not just how you feel. If you've ever come across a situation where, you see an older woman and a much younger man, you will get by far more comments from people that go, wow, that's kind of interesting, right? As opposed to, if a guy, is dating a younger girl, you're not going to get as many, unless there's a 30 plus year difference. You're not going to get that same reaction. But even with just a few years with women, sometimes you'll get people commenting about that. I've heard that over the years, many, many times.
I have those numbers
Yeah.
for you.
Oh,
Oh,
have at it.
The average age gap for heterosexual couples is 2.3 years.
mm-hmm. Makes sense.
But that distance gets larger as couples age. So by the time you're looking at the average for 48-year-olds, it's 4 years difference. So there's a little bit of maybe some marrying of younger people going on, with the male being the older one and the female being the younger one, with the gap approaching 5 years as you hit 50, as an average. So that means there's I don't know what the standard deviation there is, but this is the average difference. So overall, most people, you can say, younger woman, older man, and they happen to have in this chart homosexual marriage. I'm also interestingly, and the age gaps are much bigger with those. So for female, female, and male, male, the age gap is 7 to 8 years by the time they're getting older, almost double.
Wow.
On average.
Yeah. So
And that average is harder to explain because it's not female to male. Just the difference between the two ages is greater on average.
Yeah. So do you think that maybe our level of comfort with the men being older versus the women, do you think that's just innate biological reality, and also the cultural notions of men stereotypically being a provider, and as men get older they're more likely to be able to provide better because they've moved up in their careers, so that's why there's a real familiarity with that gap? But do you think that now that society at large is changing and really trying to advocate for less gender differences, that we'll start to see a type of effort to reverse that, trend, I guess, of the men being older, or to fight against that?
Yeah, probably.
To push that it's okay for the women. You don't call her a cougar, right? This is normal.
Yes, definitely.
Well, you're talking about more than just what's normal is what's normal. I think you're talking about a push to reverse what's normal. And this is all me speaking from observation of what this article said and stuff. I would guess, I'm not sure about the rightness and wrongness of any of this. If two adults want to consensually get into a relationship and marry each other, I'm not sure I'm not really sure what the rules are there, if there are
But
any.
it's not like it's wrong, right, for the woman to be older, but there's something there. It's kind of like if the man is shorter than the woman, it looks like you take a second take. Not like you're saying that's wrong. You shouldn't marry a woman shouldn't marry a man who's shorter, but I don't think, I mean, you could run the numbers, right, Jeff, but I don't think it happens very often.
The average height difference
here's what this would be a pretty explosive combo. Taller,
older,
taller and older,
and stronger. She's like really muscular
and stronger. Yes, that would be awesome.
But my only reason for bringing it up is that we're in sort of a culture of everything is supposed to be equal. And the reason I brought up the Guinness book of records, and I'm bringing this up, is that, like it or not, there appears to be some natural differences between males and females. Not sure how to explain it, but it's hard to believe it's just culture that makes men generally be the ones who make the high speed baby stroller and the oversized shopping cart, and finding women who are 18-year-olds to be the most desirable. And then on the flip side, women not generally doing these crazy, dumb things, and also finding peak desirability, finding men to be generally not as desirable as men peak with women all over the place, but also just at leveling off at 50 years old. I mean, all I'm saying is, what's with all these differences? Should we just act like everyone's the same? I mean, it sure seems like there's differences between males and females that are quite clear.
Well, it's like the sky is blue, though. To me, I think we all agree the sky is blue.
Would you guys, let me ask you a question. Would you guys say, and I know you're going to teeter on getting uncomfortable with this question I'm about to ask, but take, for instance, a Middle Eastern culture, okay? Would you say that it's a little bit more primitive in those cultures, meaning that some of the basics in life seem to be more intact with those cultures? Like, I'm talking about, the differences between like the Western, right, culture and there, where families aren't really all that important. They seem to be somewhat going away, right? Where like in, Middle Eastern culture, you might find a lot more importance on those things, right? Yes, no, agree,
Well,
disagree?
you'd have to define primitive culture, but you're defining it now. You're saying that
it sounds like you're saying traditional, like the traditional.
Yes. Traditional, yes. Would you say that is true? Because I'm going somewhere with this question. Because if you remember, if you do agree with this goes in that whole axiom thing. Because if you do agree on these certain particular points, then I can go, okay, cool. We have some kind of foundation to work from, and then I can ask the next question. Does that make sense?
Well, I'd say I don't know enough deeply about Middle Eastern culture. I've never even been there, and from from autobiographies I've read of people who've grown up in those societies, um, I would say something that's come through is maybe it's more heavily patriarchal, and so when you talk about traditional, I mean, there's some of that, some of what we think is of traditional. I could probably agree. And again, this is me still acknowledging that I don't really know a whole lot. And you're talking about a you know, many, you're talking about a lot of countries, and there's just a lot there.
Well, and I agree. I like what you're saying there, but just based on the information that's been presented to you, let's not even go, where we have all this, extensive experience in the culture and we know exactly what it's like, but just based on the information presented to you, that would be history books, conversations, and then, stuff that comes up on the news. Just things that you come across. Would you generally agree that they're more traditional in this, in the, and that's even we have to say traditional. I mean, that's why I use the word primitive, because if we say traditional for them isn't the same as traditional for us. There's some similarities there, but I would go even more basic than that. Yes? No?
Well, yeah, I'd say I think traditional is better. And I think traditional meaning more comfortable with the idea of set gender roles for males and females, less of an openness towards, say, like Western um, some of the aspects of Western culture, like really open embrace of some of the sexuality, like in our movies, right, in Western movies and things like that. I would agree that they seem to be more traditional, like in a and again, like I mentioned, patriarchal, like.
Right.
And
So
that's speaking in broadly general terms. Yes, I
yes.
sure.
Okay, good. No. So I mean, with that said, in that context, from what I've observed, again, not because I've been there, just because of the things I've read, history books, because of news, whether it be political or, opinionated or not, you still find the facts, or you still, get some kind of base, some kind of foundation of the culture and what's going on. So um, it seems in general, in that culture, you're going to find that older men will marry younger women. And that seems kind of be the standard. And they kind of, it seems like it's kind of a natural thing that's accepted in their culture, very accepted, right? There's nobody, at least from our perspective, nobody seems to be arguing whether that's right or wrong. There seems to be an order. Now, I guess, the, the well, let me ask you, would you agree?
Um, I I haven't looked into that much at all, but
She's planning
on
her trip to
first
the Middle
glance,
East,
yeah, no,
and she
not
just doesn't have it together yet.
not
The
interested.
funds.
But but sure. However, when you talk about people who disagree, I mean that was part of my some of the accounts I've read, are of women who were distraught at the how they were going to have a forced marriage with someone much older who they didn't even like and weren't attracted to, and the age gap was something that horrified them. They did not want to be married to somebody who was that much older than them. So yeah, isn't that woman who speaks a lot, like she's on she kind of speaks out against female genital mutilation. Her last name's Ali. I don't have her full name, but I think that was what led her, I think, to flee her um,
Oh yeah.
country was within the Muslim system. It was a forced marriage. Anyway, to an older man. So
There's
Yes.
something
Yes.
missing. I just realized there's
what?
something missing. A man's desirability peaks at 18, but the question is, what about those 18-year-old women? What age that for that subgroup? What age is desirable to them?
Oh, I would say 25.
See, because there's this general number, you have to ask also how that works between ages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'd say they're what do you have that number?
No, I
Oh,
don't. I'm just pointing out that that is left out. This is a general statistic versus looking at the subgroups and what age they find desirable. That'd be interesting because what if you found out that 18 to 20-year-olds also felt that older men were attractive? That would be interesting. I would really
not
be
that old though.
surprised
Like
about it.
50s. 50s such a big gap. I'd be surprised. But I would think like 20s, like mid 20s. They'd be interested in somebody in their mid 20s. That's my guess.
So are you guys familiar with who Heidi Fleiss is?
It's the lady,
Heidi,
the
like,
madam from long ago,
Yes.
the
Yes.
Hollywood madam.
Mm-hmm. So I I watched an interview or a documentary on her. Um, One of the things that she talked about, interesting enough, and she was like in her early 20s when she was doing this stuff. And she basically said, yeah, if a guy didn't have, well, this is a paraphrase, but she did, somewhat say this. She said, if a guy didn't have, gray hair, he wasn't silver. I wasn't interested in him at all. She liked older men, so she was very open about that desire of hers. So it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know. So I guess here's what my next question would be, because it's kind of interesting. So you have this these women that were commenting and horrified by the idea of like arranged marriages, and then arranged to somebody that's much older than them, right? Somebody that they didn't like. So um, is that, I mean, if you look at that culture, how does it work? How does it work in that kind of stuff? Um, how do you maintain? How do you have, are women just completely oppressed in that, or is there something to that practice that they do?
Are women oppressed in that culture?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, think about the comments that you read. I mean, and that may be because women probably can't go onto like a Facebook or whatever and make those kind of comments. But it seems like from what you were saying that the comments coming from women were just absolutely horrified by the idea of like arranged marriages and things like that.
Oh yeah, no, I would say I am very glad to have been born in this country versus in one of those countries. I remember one of the accounts I read, and maybe, I'm hearing the worst of it because I mean, someone felt compelled to write this book of their life and to talk about the terrible things that happened to them. But in one of the accounts I remembered, like the girls would get molested by their brothers and uncles um, and they would get chastised if they talked about it. And it was like, basically, shut
Yeah,
up,
that's
he's the
awful.
boy, I don't want to hear anything bad about him. And the boys were valued to such a, not just how we're talking about gender differences or acknowledging gender differences, but they were so much more valued than the girls. Their word was so much more valued. Their desires were more valued, even to the point of, molesting their sisters or cousins, and the boys would not get any, it was like the girls were not treated as equal humans. And that's very
Yeah,
oppressive. And
yeah,
I would be more for acknowledging there's gender differences, we're different. And I say for us, as Jeff and I as parents, um I could see doing things differently for boys and girls, acknowledging there are differences, right? There's differences in the way our girls are going to be um, viewed in society, or the way that they might be victimized. So I could do things, I could see treating boys and girls different, but not to the extent of these accounts that I read, where the
yeah.
girls' testimony and legal status was just so different than a boy's would be.
Right, right. So I think we're gonna just take the basic the starting point where we started this conversation about these statistics. If you leave out the factors of the oppression, right, and you leave out some of the more extreme factors of the freedoms that the Western culture may have in general, it seems like relationships kind of just work in particular ways. Naturally, people gravitate towards certain things, right? Yes.
Sure, like on average. Yes.
Yes, 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 exactly. So, I'm not really surprised by those statistics at all. I do find they're
At
interesting,
all
right?
wrong.
At all.
20, 18, and 50.
Yeah,
Not even a
50 was
little.
surprising.
Not even a
50's
little
old.
surprised that
Oh,
you're going to peak
oh.
at 50 in your desirability to women.
Well, no, okay, so yeah, no, that's if you think about it in those terms, I guess yeah, a little bit surprising. Uh, but again, it's not something. I think if the I think if the I think if that statistic was flipped, I think people would find it more surprising, right? People would be like, "No, that's
Oh no,
weird.
yeah.
That's
The
not."
gist of it is consistent with experience.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I
Even
mean,
though I find it kind of strange when Donald Trump gets his third wife now, and she's over 20 years younger than him. It is one of those things that's it's like it's a reoccurring theme in this world. And I'm not gonna accept that she's been forced into that marriage. I think she's a cognizant human being who chose to marry him. And so
Yes.
there you go. Like, how does that happen? Not sure exactly, but it is a consistent pattern that you see.
Well, let's ask it. Let's ask it to Dana though. Dana, I mean, just your conversations that you have with people, or people, things that you've observed, and from a woman's perspective, that relationship, is that like completely unfathomable? Is that something that, for the most part, doesn't take place?
Oh, I don't know anybody who has an age gap that big. That 24 years. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of an outlier, right?
Yes.
Situation. Definitely an outlier.
Yeah, especially based on the average, right? I mean, 2.3, whatever it was.
Yes. So let me think. 24. Yeah, that would be. I don't know if you can hear me now. Maybe
I
I
can
cut
hear
out.
you.
Okay, so I'm 39. So a 24-year gap would be me marrying a 63-year-old. If Jeff were to pass away, I'd marry a 63-year-old. That's crazy. That's so old. He's like retiring.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
It's like getting Social
But
Security.
as you laugh, the thing is that it happens. That's the thing.
no, it does. No, it
It
does happen.
occurs. It's happening. I just, you
And the
you have
only
to process the fact that it happens. I mean,
no, the only reason I'm laughing is because of the way that Dana put it. But in reality, though, you're right. That is the case. I met somebody the other day. Her boy, I don't know how, she's probably like 20. Well, I know she's 21, 22. Happened to be in a conversation with her, and she was telling me about her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's 36. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a big age gap, but then she was telling me some stories about some of her other friend, and it seemed to be, same kind of, almost a very similar situation. So I'm almost leaning that it's not as uncommon as we think, or at least it somewhat appears. I mean, I will say, from my own observation, from the things that I see, you typically see a couple year age gap with married couples or people in relationships. I don't normally see these, large, age gaps where you see like somebody, 60 married to somebody that's 30. It happens. I mean, I don't want to say I haven't seen it, because I have, and I have seen quite a few of them, but not a huge number, not a huge number of those situations. So,
Yeah, I
I
was
mean,
just gonna say,
obviously some other factors, right?
sure. I think at 10 years though, you start to wonder if something's wrong with the person. Like I feel like I remember a long time ago, I think talking about someone who was maybe 19 or 20, and I think I heard that the guy interested in her was 30, and that was like a big red flag to me, like, oh, is something wrong with this guy? Like, why
Mm-hmm.
is he going after someone so young, or is he looking to manipulate somebody?
Right.
So that's, you kind of feel like that, right? When they're at about 10 years and say the girl is 18 or 20, like you think this guy might be a abusive predator or something.
Right, right. So why though? Why would we go there? I mean, what is it about that? Because that seems to be, somewhat of a consensus when you hear, just women in general talking, and having conversations. You'll hear, wow, like that guy, he's like, let's say somebody, interested in women that are much younger. There seems to be some kind of element there where people say, we'll use the word pig, right? So men are pigs, that's how they are. Um, well, so what is it about that? What is it about that particular age gap, and that dynamic that makes it so weird? Do you have any perspective on that? Do you know what I'm saying, or am I making sense?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Jeff field this one.
Oh,
So,
well,
so
I heard you. I dare suggest that age is not just an arbitrary thing, but that it actually comes with changes and experience and wisdom. And so there is a significant difference between my 10-year-old self and my 15-year-old self and my 20-year-old self and so on. And really specifically now, something happens around 15 on that you really, at least for me, in my experience, started to understand things a little bit more clearly. But once you hit 20ish, you really, I think, start thinking for yourself, start to change perspective a little bit. And then as time goes on, you do gain something. I don't think it's just a meaningless name. And so when you see those big differences between the two, if you take into account that age does provide some sort of development, call it wisdom, there is a mismatch between someone who's 10 or more years in age. But also, as they get older, it's less important because
Yes.
let's say once you get to 35, that's a significant 15 years. From 20 to 35, that's a very significant 15 years. And I can tell you, I work at a school with young people, and it sure feels like anything like that would be manipulation because you know so much more than them. They're just like little people. And so at 30, 35, you feel like you've learned so much. So to me, that seems significant. But then from 35 on, I don't know, I'm not past 40 yet, but I can see why the difference wouldn't be as important. So that's my first thought is that there
yeah.
is some mind development going on up into your older years that makes that relationship strange. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it certainly is strange.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and just kind of, I like using the term natural order of things because there seems to be somewhat of a resistance towards admitting that there are things that people just kind of gravitate to, right? Um, there was a reference to, our culture trying to reverse these behaviors, right? Make it more acceptable for like an older woman to be dating a younger man. Because typically people are like, yeah, it's okay, we accept it. But, with same thing with the age gap, people seem to have a little bit of a, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I think there is something weird about it, but
So, so
also
would,
I'm going to say something that connects the study with reality, which people I think aren't saying, but it might be the underlying tone too. And that is there is this desirability factor. So if it's been shown by this study, something that people know, which is that 18-year-old has this sort of desirability. But to me, that desirability is shallow and it connects directly to this male sexual drive that exists. And to not confront that reality is something we kind of do as a culture. But there's a reality that is shown by that study, and that is that men are kind of gross. They are pigs because they are very superficial and visually oriented. It appears from my relationships with other men and from the covers of the magazines in the store and there's just so many overlapping pieces of evidence that men are pigs. And so you take that fact, and again, while a 35-year-old and a 20-year-old, I'm not saying that it's de facto, if that's the right phrase, but wrong or something. The wisdom element, that is the growth and knowledge and experience over time, places an immediate incongruence that makes you wonder about how these people relate to each other on a level where they're going to get connected forever. And then there's the pervert factor, right? That if men have these tendencies to be gross and superficial, you can't help but wonder if that person's just being gross and superficial.
Yeah, yeah. And again, there seems to be, I think, somewhat of a, I mean, what you're stating right now, you can actually observe in your interactions with people. So you will hear women, make those statements. The guys are pigs, or he's disgusting. All he's interested in is one thing, right? I mean, that's something people just come out openly admit and state, and they're generally pretty open about that kind of stuff.
And I've observed it. I will concur that
Yeah.
there are males who just live within their gross self, and it's gross.
Well, so
It's true. The men I don't know how much I talk about my fellow uh, men, but men not. This is not all men, but there are men out there who just let their feelings be uncontrolled, and they're just gross. They will look at a female and without reservation just objectify them and be disgusting and think it's all
yeah,
right.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I
I think,
first
Ron, are you triggered as a representative of the male population?
say that again, please.
Are you triggered?
Oh, by this?
Yes. You feel like
Uh,
anyway,
like,
no,
do I feel like I'm being demonized as a
you're being
real?
attacked. All men are being thrown under the bus.
No, 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 no. And the reason why is because you can't ignore what women actually say.
Well, what men actually say,
Well, what
right?
men actually say.
Jeff was talking about the grossness of men, and I concur. It was illuminating to me in high school to hang out with a bunch of male friends regularly, and they would openly talk about how they objectified women and themselves and how they got girls to do different things with them. And it was enlightening to see how they were just being, like Jeff said, gross people. And I realized how much these girls were probably living in a different reality where they may have thought that these guys were like in love with them or something. It was really enlightening.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a huge thing. That's the president of the United States was recorded saying those kinds of things, right? I mean,
There you
uh,
go.
yeah,
Makes you
no,
wonder.
it's, but that is something that's just, it's not that uncommon to observe if you're in any kind of male circle. Those are the kinds of things that you're going to hear. That's just the reality of it, unless, of course, you're in a professional or religious environment. But beyond that, um, and even in those environments, and things, people are talking. That's just what they're doing. So Yeah, there is a would you, I guess would you say, uh, Dana, that there's an epidemic of just male pigs running around?
Oh, like what you said though, it's since we're familiar with Christian circles in Christianity, I think Christianity has a amazing civilizing influence on men. I know when Jeff has got together, well, like, he recently went on a church retreat, and while
Mm-hmm.
he had some maybe disagreements with some of the spiritual elements to it, it was not a pig fest, right, Jeff? It
No,
wasn't Donald
it was
Trump
not a pig
talk.
fest.
Like,
And
so
yeah,
some
it was
men
not a
don't
pig
stay
fest.
in, huh?
It was not a pig fest. I can't recall a single comment amongst,
Did you
15 plus
did,
men spending a
did
few
you
days together.
did you try though, Jeff? Did you throw some stuff out there?
No, I'm not like that, Ron. That might be something that you would do, but I don't know. I didn't test the waters.
No, just as an
I
experiment.
think
Come on,
that
be
no,
honest.
no,
Did you?
I think it's inappropriate to at every level.
But you know that some men, I mean, but then that's a special thing probably, because you've been in other groups of men, Jeff,
Yeah, I
even
worked at
teachers where it's
UPS,
been gross.
teachers. I've had teachers exchanging or a teacher holding pictures of, I didn't see it, but clearly they were describing her breasts. And so it was clearly a picture of a woman and they're talking about her. And I've heard gross things from men. Uh, and when I used to work at UPS, seemed to be even more acceptable. I heard plenty of gross things. And by the way, I'm going to caveat off of this and just say that it is within my worldview that I have a reason to object, because Jesus says, not to look at a woman with lust. And so I have a principle by which I can make a decision about these types of observations that I see. So I see people looking at people lustfully. I myself have a tendency towards that, and I immediately have to cap that or stop it because I have a belief system which says that that's not correct. I find it interesting that, let's say, atheist or secularist or whatever you want to call anybody, how they come up with their moral views about all these things. I always am intrigued by that. I know where I get my views from. Like I just said, don't look at a woman lustfully, and so then that governs my life. So this whole thing you hear in the news media sometimes going over women and the way that people shouldn't look at them in a certain way and these kind of things. I feel like Christianity dealt with that 2,000 years ago. Um, and so it's refreshing to be in an environment where the men, I'm not saying everyone who calls themselves a Christian is a Christian. I'm just saying that amongst the groups that I associate with, it's nice to know that the men at least know they're not supposed to be saying that kind of stuff, so that I don't have to experience all that grossness when I'm around people who are calling themselves Christians. But in other environments, not only do I experience it, I wonder how people come up with the idea that it's wrong.
Yeah, I think in the news,
Well,
I just heard someone mentioning how during Aretha Franklin's funeral, how I guess there's some video of Bill Clinton looking Ariana Grande up and down like he's ogling her. And
yeah, I
and
saw it.
it's yeah, okay, so Ron saw, so it seemed right, like obvious. So for, like how Jeff is saying, for the Jesus belief system, you have a very consistent standard to judge that action as gross or wrong, and I think rightfully so. But if you're coming at it from this secular standard, I could see people seeing that in completely different ways. Someone could say, "Well, what's wrong with that?
Well,
Why would that be wrong in your over sexualized secular mindset?"
well, yeah. Why would you, knowing what we know about males, why would anybody be surprised that a young, attractive, um, underdressed woman standing in front of a male at his age is going to go, oh, that's nice. She has a great voice.
She has a great voice. Yeah, it's kind of naive. But what I find interesting is I
So
have a rudder on my ship, right, to steer it through. I can navigate that little situation and understand, as Dana just said, that you ought not do that. You know, because I have a belief system. But sometimes I wonder about how our culture has all these rights and wrongs. I don't know where they really get it from. And to
yeah,
get really extreme, that
Hmm.
Jim person who is coming alive every once in a while, he sent me a link to a preschool, I guess in China, where the opening ceremonies included a stripper on a strip pole doing a strip tease kind of dance.
At a
And
preschool?
yes,
they were trying to celebrate different cultures.
or she wanted to teach the principal, if that's what they call them, said something to the effect that they want to show them different dancing styles. Anyhow, the
I guess
people
this was
objected.
American dancing styles.
So the people
Obviously.
objected. The parents objected. She ends up losing her job. But but here's the thing. I again understand why that's inappropriate from my worldview. But I have trouble figuring out what's inappropriate about it from a secular worldview. She's just
Well,
dancing, right?
I mean, think about it. Who was outraged by was it the Chinese culture outraged by the pole dancer at a preschool, or was
I
it the
believe so.
American?
Yes.
Oh, was it? Okay, okay. So I I was asking because I didn't know. I thought maybe in that culture maybe they're all about that. Maybe that's
Well,
what you do at
this was the
preschools.
perspective of a parent who was there who posted the pictures and was immediately wanting to remove their child. So from
Oh,
within their culture, it was clearly unacceptable, at least to this person. If and then I guess many others complained.
by the way, speaking of teachers and schools and circling back around to something you were talking about earlier, but teachers and them making, comments and blah, blah, blah. Have you noticed just by, again, observation, there is an interesting dynamic between the student teacher relationship, and that is it seems to be more acceptable for the older woman teacher to have an encounter with the younger male.
Are you talking about the
And they're,
news?
yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, I know, yes, people, you know, find that outrageous as far as what they say, but there you will see more often than not on comments where people aren't outraged by it, and especially guys are like, "Where was that teacher when I was that age?" Or what I mean, that over and over and over again. Um,
Yeah, well, they also get, I think on average, don't they get sentenced less harshly when they do get brought to trial? The
well,
female teachers will get less of a penalty on average than the males.
yeah. So yeah, yeah. Well, you gotta think. I mean, we're talking about let's go back to the nature thing again. You would have to agree that the a female with a younger male student is a much different dynamic than the other way around. It just is, right? I mean,
I don't
there's
think
a
so. I
no.
actually would like to kick down any of these little fake doors
Hmm. So
because
what?
the while an age of whatever consent changes from state to state and country to country. I already said it earlier that the anyone between 10 and 20 is very young, and the idea that these older people are going to have a relationship with these people that's acceptable, I think, is really hard to understand. I don't understand how that works out.
But it happens a lot.
I'm not denying it. All kinds of things happen. People kill their own children, Ron. Like there's tons of tons of things that happen in the world. A lot. Um, I don't base my thinking on that. I'm just talking about.
No, I know.
I'm talking about. While I, on the one hand, understand that all these numbers are arbitrary, like we're just picking numbers, and then it becomes kind of a cultural norm, and that even to this date, I think it's in some states it's as long as the parents consent, people can get married. And some actually put it in the books at 14 and then 6. They have different ages and stuff, and so understanding that it's confusing and it's different from state to state and country to country. With that in mind, I'm just saying that these relationships are problematic from the get-go. With just think about, we're talking 12 and 14, and these are the people you're talking about. With don't you see that as seriously problematic?
Well, whether it's problematic or not, that's not my point at this state. My point is, it's something that you see, you observe. Personal opinions are opinions about those things, whether we would participate, whether we feel those things are acceptable. That's a whole completely different issue. But so I came across a video when I one of the videos I sent you. There's this autoplay feature, right? So I was going through a couple of videos. I happened to come across this one, interesting enough, where this like 65-year-old man was marrying some 16-year-old girl, and they were taking pictures, and people were just outraged by this thing. People were going nuts, and I didn't know if it was fake or wasn't fake, but the general consensus, and to your point though, Jeff, to your point about this was not acceptable to people, and I have to believe that in that crowd that was watching, observing, this looked, at least appeared to be a very public event, and it appeared to be like happening in like a downtown New York or something. I don't know, like New York. It was some crowded city, and this couple was taking pictures. But this was not something people were encouraging at all. Nobody was saying this was okay. Nobody was walking by, other than the guy that was saying, I have permission, and her parents allowed me to do this. But for the most part, I didn't see anybody going, yeah, I agree with that. I think it's okay.
And while it's not,
Religious or not
while it's
religious.
not spelt out, I don't know even know what we're talking about anymore. But while it's not spelt out anywhere clearly that I can understand, there seems to be, at least in my experience in this thing called life, those two things I talked about earlier. There is a wisdom element to it. There is a growth. There is a it's hard to believe that you can relate as well to somebody with that age of gap, given your years of development.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this guy's 60 years old, and you're telling me that he's going to have what I think of as a positive relationship with someone who's 40 years younger than him. That
Right.
From the get-go, like, makes me think, okay, something's wrong here. And then of course you add in the pervert element,
Mm-hmm.
and it's huge red flags, because it seems so natural to say, well, he's just some old pervert who wants to, manipulate a young girl. That's what you want to say naturally. Now, I know nothing about these people, so like, you don't know, but
Well,
sure, it's just.
Well, and you made a comment. You said, I think you asked me a question like, when you find those things unacceptable, and the answer is, well, yeah. I mean, but we're not alone. I guess one of the things, we're not alone in that. That's not something, I don't even think, because of your, or my like inclination towards Christianity or, those beliefs, it seems like even those outside of that kind of have an issue. Right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, it's like meatball ice cream. Like you don't need a text to
yeah,
tell you something's wrong with that.
right, right, right. That's just kind of a
Well, I
natural.
think I think you do, but that's me.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, what I mean is that I don't want to get too.
just settle with meatball ice cream, Jeff. It's a meatball
No,
ice cream morality test.
what I'm saying is that yes, Dana, it's gross. Okay, I got that. I got the gross part, and doesn't take much to realize something is gross. But there's a difference between saying something's gross and saying something's wrong. So I'm gonna say meatball ice cream is gross. I can feel that all I want, but to say it's wrong, that's different, and that's where I find
Oh, good. No, that's a good
other
question.
other perspectives kind of interesting because there's often this element of that's wrong, and there's this idea of morality, and I kind of wonder where it's coming from.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Um, where would it come from?
I've often wondered. So in my belief system, it says I have a belief that the law is written on our hearts, such that whether a person's ever heard the so-called law or not, the law being, let's say, the Old Testament or the prophets.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of it being written on your heart is that within whatever it is we call our heart, we walk around with a natural, not natural by nature, but natural by creation of God, connection with what is good and what is evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as people experience their daily moments throughout the day, they're continuously in contact with the law of God about what's good and what's evil.
Yeah.
However, for myself, I
Yes.
think I can say, well, that's how I feel. What explains that feeling? My explanation is that there is a God and there is a creation that was created with things that are right and wrong. The gap I have between myself and the secularist or the atheist is they also experience the same thing I experience, the meatball ice cream, and they go, "Oh, this is gross," naturally. But then they just go with their feelings and say, "Okay, that's wrong, and this is right, and that's wrong, and this is right." And it confuses me because in an atheistic worldview, the implication of that is that we're all just a bunch of molecules that happen to form themselves in a certain way, and we happen to not like meatball ice cream, but there's nothing really actually like wrong about it, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense. So I like to look at it in I've asked the question to a couple of atheists over time, never really received an answer. But if I just observe my cat, right, my cat has certain behaviors, and the cat will go out and it will go hunt birds, and I bring back a bird, and the bird's it's on its last breath and on its last leg, and I'm looking at it and I'm just kind of horrified by it, in some sense, because here's my cat brought a bird into the house, and there's blood all over the place, and it's like murder. But I'm not screaming and yelling at my cat and saying, how dare you? And neither would, I don't think, an atheist or anybody, right, would say those kinds of things, um, because that's just kind of a natural behavior of a cat. And so I would think, from the atheists in that worldview, that they would view humans in a similar manner, right? That they would go, well, that's just kind of how humans behave, and so their perceptions of what's right and what's wrong, I'm a little challenged by that myself for those reasons.
Yeah,
And
because
having
if
listened,
say,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, because say humans naturally get really mad and sometimes they kill each other. So you're saying someone who's from atheists were just molecules perspective could probably just as easily say, just like the cat and the bird, well, it's natural.
Right.
Why are we going to get all
Right.
judgmental about that?
Bent out of shape out about that, you know.
Right. Right.
And I had heard, I've had
Survival of the
some,
fittest.
I've had some conversations with atheists and listened to them, and they might say, well, it's natural for me to not like it. And it gets real interesting, these conversations, because there's this sort of undertone of acknowledging that this is all meaningless, but then this overtone of, but I'm still going to play like it's meaningful. It's something I've never quite understood. And I've tried to have that conversation when I can with atheists or people who don't have beliefs, agnostics, let's say, or whatever. And it doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, I don't hold those beliefs. So if it made sense to me, I probably would more likely accept them. But I'm saying that it doesn't make sense to me. Like I'm seriously trying to understand it, and it doesn't make sense to me. Anyhow, let me think here. What the heck was today's show about? I'm actually kind of like, what? I'm kind of wondering what happened.
I don't know. We just kind of just started talking.
I was just trying to bring up an example of how there's differences between males and females, really.
Well, no, and I think you accomplished quite a bit with that objective. It may not have exactly played out how you thought it was going to, but there are some obvious observations that we have made tonight where there are some clear differences between males and females. There just are. But I mean, from my perspective, there's quite a few of those were actually addressed.
Like women have long hair and men don't.
Women.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Women generally like older mates,
That
and
was
men
a
don't.
joke, by the way. I was trying to be funny.
No, I
I
know.
imagine some people didn't understand that as a joke, but anyways. All right. Well, I think we're wrapping up then, huh?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Any last words, Dana?
I just think it's amazing how many interesting places our spaceship can fly from in a dating app survey. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is interesting. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ron. Were you going to say something?
No, that's anyway, I will talk to you soon.
Oh, really?
Yes. Like real soon.